It wasn't about me. It was about we. How do we make everybody look like a hero? My priorities are my family, one. My health is two. And then living the best vacations in the world is three. I'm a big believer in trying to work yourself out of a job. And you do that by hiring great people. I think, the best team in the world that surrounds me.
Welcome to our executive interview series, where we dive deep into the minds of industry leaders shaping the business world. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Jason Liberty, President and CEO of Royal Caribbean Group, one of the largest cruise companies in the world. Jason has been with Royal Caribbean for nearly 2 decades, holding numerous leadership roles, including Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, before stepping into the CEO role in 2022, where he now oversees Royal Caribbean's global operations. Jason brings a wealth of experience in finance, strategy, and operations, having also served as a director at KPMG before joining Royal Caribbean. He earned his MBA from Kenan-Flagler, where he serves on the board of advisors. Jason, we're thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome to the Executive Interview Series.
Great. Well, Terrence, great to be here, and very excited to talk to you guys today.
So you've had quite a career journey from your early days at KPMG to leading one of the largest cruise companies in the world. How did your upbringing and college experience shape who you are? And were there any pivotal moments during that time that influenced who you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, I come from kind of a middle class family. Both my parents are divorced actually quite early. My mother was kind of in the insurance field, and my father was a serial entrepreneur that most businesses did not work out. But the business that did work out when I was in high school was a furniture business that I had basically been instructed to work in since I was about 14 years old. So if I wasn't doing schoolwork or if I wasn't playing sports, I was expected to help sell and deliver furniture in my spare time and in my weekends. But it was actually quite a great experience when you kind of look back. Maybe not at the time; it felt very laboring. But when you look back, interacting with customers at a very young age, problem solving issues that were occurring, and delivering product, through delivering of furniture, I think really shaped me and matured me. And I ended up, because of my father's health, through college, through undergrad, having to really run that business and sell that business, through college. So when I entered KPMG at 22, I was a pretty, kind of mature 22-year-old, and was very comfortable dealing with clients, and also identifying where issues were, and also being very solution oriented and helping clients through that. So I think my upbringing, taught me, I think, a strong work ethic, but also early on how to deal with customers. When you kind of move into the KPMG world, I think the other really benefit I had is I joined KPMG in 1997. And a couple of years later is when Enron and everything occurred. And the big four firms split off their consulting firms. Most of them did. And I had spent a couple of years doing auditing work, which was not really my thing, though I learned a lot. And I was one of the first employees of the advisory practice of KPMG. So I spent 6 or 7 years in a highly entrepreneurial environment that was basically creating products and services for clients, that ended up mainly replacing the consulting business of those firms before coming to Royal Caribbean.
So you mentioned that very entrepreneurial environment, and I understand you worked at KPMG for 8 years and then started at Royal Caribbean. And during those early years, How did you begin to develop your own leadership style? And were there any key experiences or mentors that helped you lead the way you lead today?
Yeah, well, at KPMG, I was surrounded by great talent and great leaders. I remember very early on, somebody said to me, because I was very focused long-term career-wise on just being a partner in a Big Four firm. I thought that seemed like a really great career and great life. And somebody said to me, if his name was Howard Crossman, said if you want the part, you got to act the part. And so I was very kind of tuned into how I showed up every day, and making sure I was as professional as I possibly could be and as polished as I could be. That I was well read into the situation, so I could come off as if I probably knew more than I really did. And of course, because of the entrepreneurial nature of the advisory side of the business, you were put in leadership positions very early. I was pretty much promoted every year, and those teams grew very quickly. So when I joined, we were probably less than 100 people in advisory, and when I left the firm, just the U.S. alone was over 2,000 people. And so you got a chance to learn to lead very quickly. And I think because I was so comfortable interacting with clients from just how I kind of grew up, I was in very senior conversations at 25 and 28 years old. And one of those conversations, or one of my clients, was Royal Caribbean. And that introduction over time led to them coming and knocking on my door.
So you work your way up through Royal Caribbean, and in 2013, you were an EVP and you started your MBA at Kenan-Flagler. You graduate in 2015, and then less than 7 years later, you become CEO of Royal
Yep.
Caribbean. How did you navigate your way through the company so quickly, and what factors contributed to that rapid rise?
Yeah. Well, CFO happened for me faster than I had really anticipated it to. I'd come into the company as the head of audit, as well as strategy, as well as kind of M&A. So I was doing a lot of audit work. I was setting up the audit group. I was setting up risk management, enterprise risk management, doing a lot of special projects and M&A related work. And M&A was kind of more what my background was. And then when after a couple of years of that, I was taken out of that as I kind of became the right hand to the CEO and the left hand to the CFO, as I was kind of like the fixer inside the organization. And so I went to go lead up corporate strategy, corporate finance, and then basically every year they added more and more responsibility. But one of the things that I felt that I was very strong on the finance side. I already had multiple master's degrees in finance and accounting, but I wanted to strengthen my understanding of marketing and strategy, et cetera, so that I was as well-rounded. And it was also, I think, important, again, looking and acting the part, to also have that MBA degree. And so that's when I went and I was able to kind of pursue it in the way that fit my situation with lifestyle and work. And I think that it also really helped me understand all the ingredients that go into making a good decision. And it helped inform things that we were doing internally that we could have been doing better, which it did. And so, yeah, so in 2013, I had just turned 37 years old. My predecessor in the CFO job decided to retire early. He was in his mid 50s, and they took a chance on me in 2013 to become the CFO. And the company really kind of took off from there. Our profitability, our return profile changed dramatically. And about 2 or 3 years into the job, they started to add again more more responsibility. And so kind of pre-COVID, the majority of our shoreside people reported to me. Most functions, like, shared service functions reported into me, as well as our joint venture, TUI Cruises, which is a large German cruise line, and Silver Sea, which is our ultra luxury cruise line. So they had been grooming me as I had been investing in myself during that time to prepare myself. I don't know if it would have really prepared me for what was to come with COVID, but they were clearly investing in me to make sure I was as ready as I could be to take on the CEO job one day.
Throughout your journey, your career journey, did you know that higher level executive leadership was something that you always wanted? And I ask this because I know we have a variety of students who are in various points of their career. Some may be thinking about higher level executive roles, some maybe are more comfortable in where they are in the organization and have different priorities. And so, did you always know, or was there a particular point in your career that you decided that a higher level executive position was something that you wanted to pursue?
My general ambitions were to kind of do better than the previous generation and to have more stability. And so my goal until I came to Royal Caribbean was really to be a partner in a Big Four firm. I didn't have broader ambitions than that. Um, I had a colleague of mine who left KPMG to go work for a company, a public company, and he said, if you either want to become a partner in the Big Four firm or you want to be like an executive in a kind of Fortune 500 size type of company. So when Royal came knocking on my door, which I turned down a job multiple times because I loved KPMG, but I was traveling a lot. And I also, my wife was about to have our first set of twins. So I have two sets of twins. And I wanted to be very present for them. And so I knew Royal was littered with great talent. I'm in and out of, I was in and out of a lot of companies. And I think Royal was a lot of kind of, most companies I would say 20 or 30% have great people and maybe 70% were good, not great. Royal was like 80, 90% great people. And, they were the very best in what they do. Because if you think about a cruise line, it's a floating city. So anything that you can imagine happening inside of the business world and as well as the back of the house of a city, you have to have the very best people who know how to deliver that each and every day in a very consistent manner. So I was very drawn to Royal, but even coming in up until the time when they made me CFO, it was clear that they were developing me, but there wasn't a piece of paper that had my ambitions to be the CFO of the company. My ambitions were to make the company successful. I believed very strongly in acting like an owner. So they would see me show up every day, acting like an owner. They would see me every day with great passion, strong work ethic. I was very focused on, it wasn't about me, it was about we. How do we make everybody look like a hero? And then over time, I just got stronger and stronger in terms of my leadership capabilities and driving results that they put me into that CFO job. And it didn't even cross my mind, the CEO job, until one day my predecessor here said, have you thought about the CEO job? And I really had not thought about it because if you know me well, I was typically focused on how do we, deal with something that was happening inside the business. And he told me that I should really think about it, and maybe spend some time looking at what the job description is and maybe what other skills I need to develop over time to be able to do that. And then, one day the board knocked on my door and said, this is the board and my predecessor said, this is what the plan is, and then this came to be. But I never had great ambitions to be in this role. I've always had great ambitions, I think, for the company to be super successful. I've always had great ambitions to be a great husband and a great father and be present. And I'm, always present in their lives because I strongly believe legacy is your family and your friends. It's not what you do for a living.
So you worked at Royal Caribbean during the Great Recession in 2008, and then you were CFO at the beginning of the pandemic and took over as CEO in January 2022. And after everything that Royal Caribbean had been through during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, you were facing a lot of adversity. And as we record this interview today, it seems like Royal Caribbean is more successful than it's ever been. What have you learned about leading through adversity through all of your experiences?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned, and we saw this, a lot of learnings from the Great Recession that put us in a strong position going into COVID, though COVID was a much different situation. And of course, that is, having a diversified business, right? So, Great Recession, we were very US centric, and we globalized our brands, we globalized our deployment. And we also wanted to have an investment grade balance sheet that was unencumbered, which would provide us ultimate flexibility. The other thing is that we had learned that you want to treat your stakeholders like partners, not like commodities. And so we had really great relationships with our banks and with our investors and suppliers, et cetera. So when, one day, and I think of all industries, we were directly hit by a meteor. We had the balance sheet to absorb that meteor. We had the relationships with the banks and with investors to make sure that we could raise $13 billion of capital. Because there's nothing you're going to learn here in business school that's going to teach you how to run a business that when revenue stops for 18 months, and you were generating over $10 billion a year in revenue, that there's an easy path to just survive that. But I think the thing that I probably learned the most through the pandemic and adversity is when you surround yourself with a team of best athletes who want to win and appreciate that they need to be flexible in what they do, you can really come out of this in a much different way. And what I mean by that is we all had to step up in different ways at a level of effort that was extraordinary in order to make sure that not only did we end up on the other side of this, but that we would thrive. And so I think a lot of companies during the pandemic kind of curled up in a ball and just said, we just need to survive this. We were as focused on thriving coming out of it as we were surviving. And so we made a lot of decisions through that. We probably raised some additional capital through that to make sure that when we were able to come back online, we were at a full sprint. And you can see that in how we maintained our ships through the pandemic, how we gave loans to the travel agent community, and how we made sure we had all the muscle that we had plus going into COVID so that we could propel the business going forward. And I think that's what you see today is a significant difference in the valuation of the business, how our valuation compares to our competitors, and has put us in a leading position. And I think that's a result of a culture of innovation and dreaming and delivering and focus, right? We're focused solely on delivering the best vacations in the world and doing that in a responsible way. And whether you're, somebody on our ship delivering that, or whether you're, somebody sitting in accounts payable, our mission is very clear.
Through that adversity, you talked about thriving and the importance of after that adversity is over, being better for it. And I know that resilience is a concept and a word that you hear a lot and that companies want in their employees and companies expect in their leadership. How do you specifically inspire and motivate people?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the really important parts in leading is being an effective communicator. And one of the things that we did a lot was communicate across our organization, really across our ecosystem. Our executive committee met every single day during COVID. We had weekly meetings with our board, weekly meetings with basically our entire company, just updating them on our progress, on what was going on. We would celebrate the wins. We would talk about the challenges. And same thing with the travel agency community, that delivers half of our business. Just making sure that everybody knew what we knew. And of course, you have to show up in a way that you're confident that you're going to get there. And I think answering some tough questions that might be on people's minds. I also think that when people understand sincerely that you're you're all in to make sure that we get to the other side of this, and that their situation, whether it's their livelihood or what might be happening in their personal environment, is very top of mind in your decision making. That gives them a lot of confidence, and I think ease of mind that there's a path to get on the other side of this.
Earlier, you talked about your family and your definition of success. And I know there's an increasing focus on health and wellness in the corporate world, but there's also that pressure to work long hours, work 365 days a year, and hardly ever take a break. And how do you balance the competing demands and ensure that you're leading at your best, both personally and professionally?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in what I describe as work-life integration. I don't think there is perfect work-life balance. I think there's work-life integration, and I think it's setting the priorities of what's there. Like I find, I swim 4 or 5 days a week. I work out a couple days a week. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get those things done, get back to my house so I can wake up my kids. Though my older two are now in college. One is actually at Chapel Hill. Other one's at Wake Forest. So I FaceTime with them all the time. But I wake them up in the morning, and I don't get home at 5 o'clock. I might get home at 7 o'clock or 7:30 at night. But I'm there. I'll go to their soccer practice, and just being present. And sometimes I might be answering emails, or I might be on a phone call, and just making sure that I understand priorities. Right, priorities are my family, one, my health is two, and then delivering the best vacations in the world is three. And I don't do a lot of other things. So you're not seeing me. You can see in my I'm in Miami right now, which is where we're based. I don't go to South Beach, hitting the clubs at nighttime. I'm home, and I'm present, and I find ways. I utilize like time really well. Like to and from the office, I have somebody that takes me. So I pretty much clear all my emails before I come into the office. I cleared all my emails or had all my calls that I need to have before I get home. And that takes hours out of what might have to happen at nighttime for work purposes. The last thing I'll say, Terrence, which I think is probably the most important part, to how do you like in these jobs, you're going to work a lot of hours, but I'm a big believer in trying to work yourself out of a job, and you do that by hiring great people. And so I think the best team in the world that surrounds me. They're the best at what they do, and so while there are things that come up that you're always dealing with, we have 180,000 passengers a day on one of our ships somewhere in the world. We have 68 ships or 68 floating cities, so things happen. But when you have great people, you have to be less involved in the details of some of that stuff.
Final question. As you think about where you were 9 years ago getting your MBA, what advice would you have for our current executive MBA students about how to lead and manage others?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of great things to take away from business school. Hopefully, you've built some great relationships, and hopefully, you feel you're now tooled with the skills you need to make a good decision. And I think that's what an MBA really does more than anything else, is it gives you the skills to make a really good decision. And I think that that to me is a superpower that you have each and every day when you go into the workplace. A few things I would say is I think you need to understand the coordinates of where you want to go. So to use a shipping metaphor, right, a ship with no destination can land anywhere. And I think, I think always having an understanding of what you're trying to personally drive and deliver, whether that's on your personal side or professional side, I think is important because that informs the roles that you have, the projects you might go on, and the relationships that you might want to, harvest over time. The relationships I made in business school, by the way, were very helpful even in the pandemic. There were people very senior at some of the banks that I was in business school with that helped me navigate through some of those challenging things. My one best piece of advice when you finish the MBA program is you don't need to quote teachers in your real life. That's one of the sometimes I see that where people will reference when they get right out of business school, in Professor McElroy's class, he said this. You paid for the degree, so all that knowledge that comes out of your professor's mouth is now your knowledge. So you don't have to go out and quote what happened in business school, but own it, use it as a superpower, and outwork everybody, outwork everybody. It's amazing what can come forward for you.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your time and insights with us today. I think your experiences on leadership and leading through times of diversity and coming out better because of it have been incredibly valuable. Really appreciate your advice, and thank you for joining the Executive Interview Series.
Great. All the best. Thank you.
I'm grateful to all those who made this interview possible. To Jason Liberty and Jason's executive assistant, Alexa Hughes. To our Kenan-Flagler alumni engagement team, Lindsay Russ, Matt Fox, and Cassie Diltz. And to Mike Christian, Jess Christian, LaBelle Miguel, and the entire Executive MBA team for their support and encouragement for this executive interview series. We'll talk more about this interview, particularly Jason's perspective on leading at your best during our live session.